An exciting atmosphere prevailed in the house of the Shinichny family. Artyom, the eldest son, first invited the girl to meet her parents. Elena was busy preparing dinner from the very morning, trying to make everything perfect. Her husband, Mikola, helped where he could, but most of the time he watched his wife, sometimes making humorous, sometimes encouraging comments. "Do you think she really suits him?" asked Olena, spreading the napkins. "If he brought me home, then for sure," answered Mikola, smiling. "The main thing is not to worry." When the doorbell rang, Olena wiped her hands and went to meet the guests. Artem was standing at the door with his girlfriend. Sophia was tall, slender, with long brown hair and a sincere smile that immediately melted hearts. "Mom, Dad, this is Sophia," Artyom proudly introduced. Sophia presented the owners of the house with a small bouquet of flowers and a cake. "Hey, it's yours," she said. "Very nice," said Sophia, a little embarrassed. Dinner was held in a warm atmosphere. Sophia turned out to be very well-mannered and pleasant to talk to. She easily maintained a conversation, talked about herself, her work as a designer, and her hobbies. "What do your parents do?" Mikola asked. "Mom is a music teacher and Dad is in business," answered Sophia. "They have been married for over 20 years. "That's great," Elena said. "Apparently a very warm family." "Yes, they always support me," smiled Sophia. The conversation turned to different topics. Sophia told how she met Artyom at an exhibition of modern art, and how they found a common language from the first minutes. "It seems that you are very suitable for each other," said Olena, noticing how tenderly Artyom looks at Sophia. When the door closed behind the guests, Elena sighed and looked at her husband. "She's wonderful," she said. "I think Artem is happy." "Undoubtedly," Mikola agreed, "but it would be interesting to meet her parents." Elena nodded, not suspecting that this meeting with the past was waiting for her very soon. New Year's holidays were approaching, and Sophia and Artem decided to make them special. Sophia invited Artem's parents to her home so that their families could get to know each other better. At first, Elena doubted, not because of Sophia, whom she had already grown to love, but because of a strange feeling of anxiety that crept into her heart. She could not explain this feeling to herself, but decided that it was just excitement. "Mom, you love holidays," Artem persuaded her. "It will be wonderful." Sophia tried so hard, cooked, decorated everything. "Okay," Elena finally agreed, sighing. "But I do not promise that I will stay until midnight." On the day of the meeting, she spent a long time choosing an outfit, finally settling on a soft green dress that emphasized her graceful figure. When they drove up to Sophia's house, Elena noticed how carefully everything was decorated. A Christmas tree in the yard, lights on the windows, the aromas of cinnamon and oranges that flowed even into the street. Sophia and Artem met them at the door, smiling and happy. "Come in," Sophia greeted them. "My parents are already waiting." When Elena entered the cozy living room, her heart suddenly stopped. A man who seemed painfully familiar was standing by the Christmas tree. Tall, with gray hair on his temples, but with the same expressive eyes that once looked at her with love. Andrew, her first love, a person who was once her universe. Images from the past flashed through her mind. Their long evening walks in the park, when he held her hand and promised he would never let go. Hot kisses in the summer rain that took her breath away, his laughter echoing nearby as they dreamed of a future together. She remembered him looking at her like she was the most beautiful thing in the world. But then she also remembered the pain, how their paths diverged, how he left her pregnant, choosing a career and a new life instead of their youthful dream. "Mom, Dad, this is Andriy and Oksana, Sophia's parents," said Artem, interrupting her memories. "It's very nice," Olena barely said, recovering and trying to pull herself together. Her hands were shaking slightly, so she hid them behind her back. Andriy wanted to say something else, but his wife, Oksana, kindly extended her hand to Elena and started talking about the holidays, not noticing the tension between them. Mikola, Elena's husband, also did not pay attention, although he noticed several times during dinner how his wife looked aloof. Elena tried to focus on the conversation, but she was constantly haunted by memories. She remembered their last meeting, how he stood in front of her, explaining that he had to leave and that they could not be together. She screamed, cried, begged him to stay, but he just hugged her one last time and left. This pain was so strong that she promised herself never to remember it again. But now, after so many years, He was standing in front of her, and she could feel old wounds opening up. As the dinner drew to a close, Sophia offered to go over to the Christmas tree to exchange gifts. Olena gratefully accepted this offer because she needed a break from tension. Andre tried not to meet her eyes, but she felt his presence with every cell of her body. Before leaving, when everyone was saying goodbye, Olena got up to leave, but Andre came closer. "You're still as beautiful as you were then," he said quietly so no one could hear. Elena was silent, not allowing herself to answer, only looking into his face, which was once so dear to her. "No one should know," she finally said, gathering all her strength. Her voice sounded firm, even though everything inside was screaming. "I understand," he replied, looking down. When they were driving home, Mikola noticed her tension. "Is everything okay?" he asked. "Just a little tired," answered Olena, looking into the lights of the winter city. She knew that this evening would forever remain in her memory. But even more, she knew that now her life was her family, her husband, her son. But in the soul, somewhere in its deepest corners, the fire of old, passionate love was burning again, which never completely went out. The holidays have passed, but unusual tension reigned in the Shinichny household. Elena, who has always been a supportive and caring mother, has changed. Her behavior after dinner at Sophia's caused surprise not only in Mikola, but also in Artem. She began to avoid any conversation about Sophia and later openly stated that their relationship should end. One evening, when Artem returned home after meeting with Sophia, Elena was already waiting for him in the living room. Her face was stern. Determination was visible in her eyes. "We need to talk," she said, not even waiting for him to undress. "Okay, Mom," answered Artem, taking off his jacket. "Did something happen?" "Yes, it happened. You should break up with Sophia." Artem froze in place, looking at his mother with surprise. "What? Is this some kind of joke?" he said, smiling, hoping it was just a bad joke. "It's not a joke, Artem." Elena's voice was cold. "I don't want you to continue this relationship." "But why?" Artem raised his voice. "She is a wonderful girl, you said it yourself. What has changed?" Elena was silent for several seconds, trying to find the right words. She couldn't tell the truth, but she didn't want to lie either. "It's difficult," she finally said. "Just trust me." "No, Mother, not this time," Artyom answered sharply. "I am an adult, and I have the right to build my life." "You don't understand anything!" Olena raised her voice, her patience cracked like thin ice. "I know what's best for you, and you don't explain anything to me," shouted Artem in response. "You just forbid it like a child." Mikola entered the living room, hearing the argument. "What is happening here?" he asked calmly. "Your wife decided to forbid me to meet with Sophia," explained Artem, still on the edge of emotions. "And he doesn't even explain why." "Elena, is it true?" Mikola asked, turning to his wife. "Yes," she answered shortly. Why?" Now Mikola also looked puzzled. Elena pursed her lips. She couldn't reveal the truth, but her heart was filled with memories. She remembered how 20 years ago, after Andrei left her pregnant, she was left alone. She gave birth to a child and forced her mother to leave the child in the maternity hospital. "It's simply impossible," she finally said, looking at Artem again. "This is not an answer." Artem raised his voice again. "You just want to control my life." "It's for your own good," Elena shouted. "No, Mother, it's for your peace, not mine," Artem answered sharply. He turned and ran to his room. A few minutes later, Olena heard the closet door opening and closing, and the sound of a suitcase being pulled out from under the bed. She went upstairs, but when she entered the room, she saw how Artyom had gathered his things. "What are you doing?" she asked, her voice shaking. "I'm going, Mother," answered Artem, not looking at her. "I can't stay here anymore." "Artem, you can't just leave!" she begged, but her voice no longer sounded so convincing. "I can," he answered, picking up his suitcase. "And if you don't explain why you're behaving like that, you're the one who's going to lose me." Elena could not find words. Her throat was tight from pain. She stood by the door and watched her son, her only child, leave the house. When the door closed behind him, Elena fell into a chair and covered her face with her hands. Mikola came up and hugged her. "You have to do something," he said quietly. "I can't," she whispered. "I can't tell them the truth." Meanwhile, Artyom was walking along the night street, full of anger and disappointment. He didn't understand anything. Why is his mother, who has always supported him, acting so strange now. He decided that he would find the answers himself, even if it would not be easy. The night was cold and deserted. Artem was sitting on a bench in the park, hugging the suitcase that he hastily packed while running away from home. His head was spinning from a recent quarrel with his mother. Her sudden ban on his relationship with Sophia seemed to him not only unreasonable but also absurd. His mother, who had always been supportive and understanding, now suddenly turned into a person he barely recognized. At home, Elena sat in the living room, staring at the photo she was holding. She was in the picture, very young, and next to her was Andrei, the man who became her first love and her greatest pain. She remembered the day she found out she was pregnant by him. She was only 17 then. She was sure that Andrei would be her support, but he left. His career, dreams of great achievements turned out to be more important than her. When a girl was born, Elena felt joy and despair at the same time. She was all alone. Then, in a moment of weakness and fear, she decided to leave the child in the maternity hospital. This decision haunted her all her life, although she tried to forget, to hide this pain in the darkest corners of her soul. Later, she met Mikola, who became a real support for her. He accepted her with the past, and together they raised Artem, who became everything to her. But now, when Andrei and Sophia reappeared in her life, old wounds opened up. She could not look at Sophia without thinking of her daughter, whom she had left behind. She was tormented by thoughts. Could Sophia be that child? This possibility seemed unreal to her, but every detail fueled her fears. That evening, when Artem left the house, Mikola approached Elena. He was silent for a long time until she spoke. "I left her, Mikola," Elena whispered, looking into his eyes. Her voice was filled with pain. "What are you talking about?" He was surprised, although he guessed that it was about something very important. "When I was young, before I met you, I gave birth to a daughter. From Andrei," she said, and tears began to flow down her face. "I could not leave her with me." Mikola sat down next to her in silence. His shock was obvious, but he tried to remain calm. "And you think that Sophia is her?" he finally asked. "I don't know," Elena admitted, "but I see her and I can't help but feel it. I see Andrei in her features. I see what she once lost, and it tears me apart." Mikola thought, and then said, "This is not an excuse. Your son has a right to know why you are behaving the way you are. He deserved it." "I can't tell him," Elena answered sharply. "It will destroy everything. And if Sophia is my daughter, then what?" "Then you'll ruin everything even more if you don't explain anything," Mikola said calmly. Meanwhile, Artem came to Sophia. He told her about the quarrel with his mother, but did not remember the reason, because he himself did not know it. Sophia tried to calm him down, but she was also troubled by the change in Elena's behavior. "I want to understand why she behaves like that," said Artem. "But if she doesn't want to talk, I have to act myself." The next day, he decided to return home to try to find out the truth. His mother was sitting in the living room, still holding that photo. He approached her. "Mom, I want to know what happened," he said. "You can't just destroy my relationship without explaining the reasons." Elena looked at him and her heart sank. She understood that she could no longer hide the secret, but the words did not come out of her mouth. She had to make a choice, tell the truth or lose her son forever. But she could not dare to tell him the truth. The next day, Elena sat in the kitchen with a cup of cold tea, looking out the window, but seeing nothing. Her thoughts were far in the past, where everything seemed so simple, where she and Andrei dreamed of a future together. At that time, she had no idea how things could go wrong, and how their love, so strong and passionate, would end in pain and betrayal. The ringing of the phone snapped her out of her thoughts. A number flashed on the screen which she did not recognize, but intuitively understood who it was. Her heart beat faster. "Hello," she said softly, her voice trembling treacherously. "Oh, Elena, it's me, Andrei," answered the voice on the other end. His tone was deep and slightly strained. "What do you need?" she asked sharply, trying to hide her excitement. "We need to talk." Elena sighed. She didn't want this conversation, but she understood that avoiding it was no longer possible. "Okay," she replied. "Tomorrow, in a cafe near the park at 10 o'clock. She hardly slept all night. Memories of those years when she and Andrei were happy together flooded her again. She remembered how she had informed him about her pregnancy. Then his reaction became a real blow for her. He did not believe her, said that he saw her with his friend, and considered it a betrayal. She begged him to listen to her, but he just turned and walked away. The next day, while sitting in a cafe, Olena noticed Andrei approaching her. He looked older, but still as confident as he was then. However, his eyes, which had once shone with passion, were now filled with a kind of burden. "Hello," he said, sitting down across from her. "Hello," she answered shortly, keeping her hands on the table. They were silent for a few seconds, then Andrei began. Elena did not know how to begin, but Andrei broke the silence. "Elena, I need to understand what happened. Why do you treat Sophia and Artem like that? I see you are hiding something important." "You have no right to ask me such questions," she answered sharply, although she understood that he was right. But that applies to me too, doesn't it?" Andrei insisted. "What happened after I left?" Elena raised her eyes and looked at him. There was so much pain in her eyes that Andrei fell silent. She sighed and decided to finally say what she had been holding back for years. "I was pregnant, Andrei," she said quietly, but these words sounded like thunder in his ears. He froze, his face changed. He looked at her for a long time, as if he could not believe what he heard. "What?" That was all he could say. "You left me when I needed your support the most," she continued, her voice even but tears filling her eyes. "I told you I was pregnant, but you didn't believe me. You thought I cheated on you because you saw me with your friend. You didn't even let me explain." Andrei looked confused for the first time in his life. He leaned back in his chair, staring at the table. Were you pregnant?" he asked, as if checking to see if it was true. "Yes," she confirmed, tears rolling down her cheeks. "I gave birth to a girl. But I was alone, without support, and I didn't know how to live on. I left her in the maternity hospital." Andrei grabbed his head, silently digesting what he heard. His gaze, when he finally looked up at Elena, was filled with pain and pity. "Why didn't you tell me? Why didn't you try to find me later?" he asked, his voice breaking. "You left me no choice, Andrei," she answered. "You left, and I decided that you don't want to see me anymore. You don't believe how hard it was for me. I made a choice that is still tearing me apart from the inside." They sat in silence while Andrei pondered her words. After a conversation in a cafe, Olena and Andrei decided that they could no longer live in ignorance. The truth, no matter how bitter it was, had to become known to them. Andrei insisted that they try together to find the girl that Elena left many years ago. At first, Olena hesitated because she was afraid not only of the consequences, but also of whether she would be able to withstand it emotionally. The first step was to contact the maternity hospital where Elena gave birth. Andrei accompanied her, supporting every step. At the front desk, they explained the situation, and the nurse, a little confused, asked them to wait while she checked the archives. When she returned holding a thin file in her hands, Elena's heart beat faster. Her fingers trembled as she took the papers. "It says here that your daughter was transferred to an orphanage 2 days after she was born," said the nurse. "Further information can be found in the registers of the orphanage." Elena clutched the file in her hands, trying to control herself. Andrei took her hand, making her feel that she was not alone. "We'll find her," he said. The search for their daughter became not only a challenge for Elena and Andrei, but also an opportunity to look into each other's eyes again and open their hearts, which they once closed due to pain. At first, their meetings were purely business: maternity hospital, orphanage, archives. But with each step, they became closer. They were united by a common goal: to find the girl they lost. One evening, after another day spent looking for information, they decided to go to a cafe near the orphanage. Andrei ordered coffee for both of them, and they sat down at a small table in the corner. "I would never have thought that one day we would be here together," Andrei said quietly, looking at Elena. "Me too," she answered, carefully stirring the tea with a spoon. "If someone had told me about this a few months ago, I wouldn't have believed it." Andrei smiled, but sadness shone in his eyes. "I thought a lot about how everything happened then," he admitted. "About how I was wrong. I saw you with my friend, and instead of asking or trying to understand, I just decided to leave. You didn't even have a chance to explain everything." Elena looked up. Her voice was calm but filled with emotion. I was with him because he was helping me choose a present for you, Andrei. It was so silly, and yet you wouldn't listen to me." He clenched his hands into fists as if fighting himself. "I was a fool, egoist, and for that you paid the highest price," he said. Elena looked at him, and there was more in her gaze than anger or resentment. There was pain, but also compassion. Their shared loss left a mark on both of them. "We both made mistakes," she finally said, "but now we have a chance to fix at least something." With each new step in their search, they grew closer. They began to talk more not only about the past, but also about how they lived those years. Andrei said that after he left Elena, he regretted it for a long time, but did not dare to return. He thought he had lost his chance. "I got married because I thought I could forget you," he once said, "but you remained in my heart." Elena was silent, but her eyes were wet. "And you?" he asked. "Did you love Mikola?" "Loved it," she answered honestly. "He was my savior. After everything that happened, he accepted me without asking too much. I am grateful to him for everything." Andrei nodded, understanding her words, but there was something between them that they couldn't deny. Their shared past, their pain, and now returning to the search for a child have brought them back together. One evening, they were returning together after another day of searching. Andrei offered to come to his house for dinner, and Elena, although a little hesitant, agreed. They sat in his small apartment, ate a simple dinner prepared by him, and talked about their lives. "I don't know if our daughter will want to accept us," said Elena, "but I'm afraid that she will hate me the most." "Don't say that," Andrei gently objected. "You did what you thought was right. We both lost her because of my mistake. She has a right to know the truth, and we have a right to try to find it." Elena felt her heart tighten. She looked at Andrei and saw in him not only the man who once broke her heart, but also a person who was also suffering and trying to correct his mistake. "Thank you," she said quietly, "for not leaving me now." He smiled, his gaze softening. "I'm not going to leave you anymore, Elena, not this time." That night, they both realized that the search for their daughter had brought them back to each other. Although their pasts were filled with pain, they now had a common goal that made them feel closer than ever. The next stop was the orphanage where the girl spent the first years of her life. There, they learned that she was adopted when she was 3 years old. The teacher who worked at that time even mentioned that the girl had a special sign, a small birthmark near the left collarbone. "It was a nice family," said the woman, flipping through the records. "They gave her everything she needed. I remember how hard it was to say goodbye to her." Elena could barely hold back her tears, and Andrei could feel him being squeezed by the realization that they knew nothing about their daughter's life. "Do you have family contacts?" asked Andrei. "Only old records, but maybe you can find something through the registration service," answered the teacher. Later, they learned that the girl was adopted by a couple who moved to another city. Her new parents named her Anastasia. Andrei and Elena decided not to stop until they find her. They then contacted the registration service where, with the help of a lawyer, they were able to access her current details. "She lives nearby now," said the lawyer, giving them the address. "Do you want to contact her?" Elena and Andrei looked at each other. It was the moment of truth. They knew there was no turning back. "Yes," answered Andrei, "we have to do it." Nastya, as she was now called, was a young woman who worked as an interior designer. They decided to write her a letter to explain the situation and offered to meet if she was ready. "Dear Anastasia, we are your biological parents. We know this may come as a surprise, but we hope you will listen to us. We have made many mistakes in the past, but now we want to find you, explain, and if you allow, be a part of We Will Be Happy to Meet at any time convenient for you. Sincerely, Olena and Andrei." The answer came sooner than they expected. Anastasia agreed to meet. Her tone in the letter was cautious but not hostile. She wrote that she always felt there were gaps in her past and wanted to know more. "She wants to see us," Elena said, holding the letter in her hands. Her voice trembled with excitement. Andrei sat down next to her, touched her hand. "We will do it together." "I'm with you," he said. The next day they arrived at a small cafe that Anastasia had chosen for the meeting. Elena was nervous, her hands were shaking, but Andrei tried to calm her down. "Everything will be fine," he said, although he himself was worried. When Anastasia entered, they immediately recognized her. She had Andrei's eyes and a smile reminiscent of Olena. She walked over to their table, looking them over carefully. When they saw Nastya for the first time, their doubts disappeared. She had Andrei's eyes and a warm smile that reminded Elena of her own youth. Nastya was reserved but polite. "Hello," she said, sitting down. Her voice was soft but cautious. "Hello, Nastya," Elena answered, her eyes glistening with tears. "Thank you for coming." "I couldn't help but come," answered Anastasia. "Are you really my biological parents?" "Yes," Andrei said firmly. "We were both young and made many mistakes, but now we want to tell you the whole truth." They began to tell the story. Elena honestly admitted that she left her when she was completely alone, and Andrei that he never knew about her existence because he misunderstood the situation. They spoke without hiding their pain and remorse. Anastasia listened silently. Her gaze was intense but not hostile. She asked questions which they answered honestly. "It's hard to understand," she said after a long pause. "But I am grateful that you found me. I need time to process all this. Nastya, I want to apologize," she began. "I know that I made a terrible mistake by leaving you. No words can do it justice. I was young, scared, and didn't know what to do. But I know that's no excuse." Anastasia was silent, looking at her mother. Her face was impassive, but her eyes betrayed an inner storm. "I can't say I understand you," she finally said. "But I can see that you are really sorry. It's hard to accept, but I'm trying." Elena raised her head and tears glistened in her eyes. "I regretted that decision every day," she said, her voice shaking. "You have no idea how scared I was that you would hate me when you found out the truth." Anastasia softened a little. She never imagined how difficult it must have been for her mother, but she also couldn't help but think about the years they had lost. "I don't hate you," she said after a pause. "I don't know how to feel, but there is no hatred." Anastasia's words made Elena cry. She lowered her head, trying to control herself. "Thank you," she whispered. "I will never be able to return those years, but I am ready to do anything to be near you now. If you allow—" Anastasia nodded. Her face was calm, but her eyes glistened with tears. "I want to try," she answered. "But it won't be right away. I need time." Elena understood these words. She knew their journey would not be easy, but now she had hope. She held out her hand, and Anastasia took it lightly. "Thank you for letting me be a part of your life," said Elena. "We don't want to put pressure on you," said Elena. "You can decide if you want to continue talking. We are just glad we were able to find you and see how wonderful you are." Nastya looked at them, and her face softened a little. "I'd like to try to get to know you better," she said, "but it will be gradual." Elena could not hold back her tears. Andrei also felt the tension in his chest begin to ease. It was a difficult beginning, but there was hope. This meeting marked the beginning of a new stage in their relationship. The past could not be changed, but now they had an opportunity to build a future together. And this time, Elena was ready to do everything in order not to lose her daughter a second time. In the following weeks, they communicated with Anastasia, gradually building a relationship. She invited them into her home, told them about her life, and shared photos of her adoptive parents, who she said were a wonderful family to her. For Elena and Andrei, it was a chance not only to reconnect with their daughter, but also to feel that their shared pain is now turning into something bright. They were close again, not only as parents, but also as two people who were able to find a common language after so many years. Artyom, after learning the truth, was shocked, but later he understood why his mother was so afraid to reveal this story. He also began to get to know Anastasia, and they quickly found a common language. Despite everything, life gave this family a second chance, and this time they were ready to take advantage of it, cherishing every moment they could now live together. For Elena, it was a difficult, but at the same time healing moment. She understood that the past, no matter how much it hurts, cannot be hidden. Andrei also felt that now he had a chance to correct his mistakes. But the most important thing is that they all got a chance to start a new chapter of their lives together. After that evening, their relationship began to gradually change. Anastasia was not immediately able to accept Elena completely, but they both tried to find a common language. Elena invited her to her home to show how she lived all these years and to share a part of her life. When Anastasia arrived, Elena met her at the door, smiling nervously. Artem was at home and also decided to support his mother and sister. He wanted this meeting to be an important step towards reuniting their family. "Come in, Nastya," said Olena, inviting her daughter inside. "I am so glad that you came." "Thank you for inviting me," answered Anastasia, looking around the cozy house. Everything seemed so familiar and so foreign at the same time. Elena led her to the living room, where family photos hung on the wall. Anastasia stopped in front of one of the pictures that showed Artyom as a child. "That's you, isn't it?" she asked, turning to her brother. "Yes," Artyom smiled. "Mother always liked to take pictures. I think we have a photo for every year of my life." "I would like to have such photos," Anastasia said quietly, looking at Elena. These words hurt Elena, but she decided not to avoid the topic. "I regret that I could not be near you during those years," she said, looking straight into her daughter's eyes. "But now I want to create new memories, if you'll let me." Anastasia nodded. She wasn't sure if she was ready to fully trust, but she could see that Elena really wanted to right her wrongs. Over time, Anastasia began to open up. She talked about her childhood, foster parents, and the difficulties she faced. Elena listened to every word, trying to remember every detail. "You know, I always felt that I had someone else," Anastasia said once. "I could never explain it, but now everything fell into place." "You have always been in my heart," answered Olena, "even when I didn't know where you were. I never stopped thinking about you." After the evenings together and the long conversations they had during the search for their daughter, Olena and Andrei became even closer. At first, they held back their feelings, afraid to take a step back into the past that brought them so much pain. But every day their bond grew stronger. Andrei visited Elena's house more and more often. Artyom and Anastasia saw that something was happening between them, but did not interfere. It was obvious to them that their parents, despite all the experiences, were finding each other again. One evening, when Artyom and Anastasia were busy with their affairs, Andrei stayed to help Elena clean up after dinner. "Thanks for helping," she said with a small smile as he set about washing the dishes. "I can be useful not only in the search for my daughter," Andrei joked, looking at her with a sly smile. Elena laughed, but her laughter suddenly stopped when their eyes met. There was silence in the room. Andrei slowly wiped his hands with a towel and came closer. "Olena," he said quietly, "I can no longer ignore what I feel." She was embarrassed but did not back down. Her heart beat faster. "Andrei, we have already experienced this once. What if it hurts again?" she asked, although she knew that she would not be able to escape from this. "We are not what we were then," he answered, taking her hands. "We've been through so much. But now I know I can't lose you a second time." Elena sighed, looking into his eyes, and saw determination and love there. She could not resist and answered quietly, "Me too." Andrei bent down and kissed her softly. It was a hot kiss after many trials. It was not like the ones they used to have. In him was not only passion, but also maturity, understanding, and hope. Their rekindled romance after so many years symbolized the second chance they both deserved. Although their life was not easy, now they were ready to build a new future in which there was each other and their children, who became a bridge between the past and the present. When Andrei and Elena decided to live together, they understood that this path would not be easy. Their decision affected not only themselves, but also their partners, Andrei's wife, Oksana, and Elena's husband, Mykola. Both were shocked by the news, which turned their usual lives upside down. When Andrei returned home to talk to Oksana and explain his decision, she already knew about his relationship with Elena. Sophia, who noticed that there was tension between her parents, told her mother about the situation. "Andrei, is it true?" Oksana's voice trembled with anger and resentment. "You want to leave me after all these years?" "Oksana, I can't lie to you," answered Andrei, trying to speak calmly. "Olena and I got close again. I didn't plan for it, but it happened, and now I want to be with her." "What about me? What about our family?" Oksana shouted. Her voice echoed throughout the house. "This is wrong, Andrei. You are ruining our lives." "I'm sorry to hurt you," he said, "but I can no longer live with lies. My heart belongs to her." Oksana ran out of the room, slamming the door. She could not come to terms with the fact that her marriage was falling apart. Sophia, who witnessed this scene, was left between two fires: the father she loved and the mother who felt betrayed. Meanwhile, Elena also faced difficulties. She decided to have an honest talk with Mikola, but it turned out to be more difficult than she expected. Mikola had always been her support, and now she felt guilty for wanting to leave him. "Mikola, we need to talk," she began one evening when Artem was in his room. "Did something happen?" he asked, sensing the tension in her voice. "I can't hide the truth anymore," she said, fighting back tears. "I love Andrei. We decided to live together." Mikola was silent for a long time. His face remained calm, but there was pain in his eyes. "You really decided to destroy all this?" he asked. "We have been together for so many years. I was with you when you were broken. We raised Artem together. And now you just want to leave?" "I will always be grateful to you for everything," she said, "but I can no longer deny what I feel." Mikola got up and started walking around the room. "It's not just your choice, Elena," he said sternly. "This applies to all of us, me, Artem, our family. Have you thought about it?" "I know what I'm doing hurts," she answered. "But I can't live in a lie. I'm trying to find happiness." The situation escalated when Oksana decided to talk to Elena directly. She came to her house and immediately got down to business. "You are ruining my life," Oksana said, standing in the doorway. Her voice was filled with anger. "How can you take my husband away from me after everything we've been through together?" "It was not my intention," answered Elena. "I wasn't looking for that either, but Andrei and I can no longer deny our feelings." "Your feelings?" Oksana joked. "And what about mine? How is our family? You didn't even think how it would affect us all." "I know it's difficult for everyone," said Elena, "but we have the right to be happy." Oksana could not accept these words and left the house in tears. Mikola did not stay away either. He met with Andrei to express everything that had accumulated in his soul. "You come into my life after so many years and take away what I built with love?" he said, looking Andrei straight in the eyes, and swung and wanted to hit him, but barely restrained himself. "I don't want to hurt you, Mikola," answered Andrei, "but I also have the right to happiness." "Happiness? And what about my family? And what about Olena? You are taking her away from us." After these conflicts, Olena and Andrei realized that their decision should be balanced. They decided to give their partners time to think about the situation. At the same time, they continued to build their relationship without rushing events. Later, Oksana and Mikola began to accept the situation. Oksana realized that keeping Andrei close without love makes no sense. Mikola, albeit with pain, admitted that Elena has the right to her happiness. "I will never stop respecting you," Mikola said during the last conversation, "but I want you to be happy." Over time, all parties learned to live with the new reality. It was not easy, but each of them realized that it was more important to maintain peace and respect than to hold on to the past. A few months passed, and the lives of everyone involved in this difficult situation gradually began to enter a new direction. Elena and Andrei decided to live together in a cozy house not far from their children. This step was not easy, but they both felt that they had found their place next to each other. Mikola returned to his life, maintaining warm relations with Artyom and even with Elena. They agreed not to involve their son in their conflicts, and later mutual understanding prevailed between them. Oksana, despite the pain and disappointment, focused on her life. She moved to another city, closer to her relatives, and began to work on herself, trying to find happiness in a new way. Sofia remained supportive of her mother, but also maintained a good relationship with Andrei, gradually accepting his new choice. One summer day, Olena and Andrei invited the whole family to their home. It was an important event, because for the first time everyone gathered together after difficult and painful decisions. There was a covered table in the yard, around which Artyom, Sofia, and Anastasia gathered. "Who wants lemonade?" Olena asked cheerfully, pouring the drink into glasses. "I wouldn't refuse," said Artem, winking at his mother. Anastasia sat next to Sofia, and they laughed at Artem's jokes. Their relationship became warm and friendly, as if they had known each other all their lives. "What a beautiful evening," said Andrei, leaning against Elena. "Now I know that we made the right choice." Elena looked at him and smiled. "We've been through a lot, but now we have this. And that's the main thing," she answered. This was not the end of the story, but only the beginning. The beginning of a life where love, acceptance, and mutual understanding defeated all difficulties.